it is very difficult for me to talk about the GS because it's a bike filled with emotion. It's the bike that taught me that big bore engines could race properly and they could win races. They could win hard races as they did in the Dakar way back when and as they did with the HP2. It's also a bike that brought adventure biking into the world. I don't mean that people started driving bikes around the world only when the GSs came out, not at all. But when Ewan and Charlie went around on the long way around, they brought it to the masses. And this is the bike they used, the GS. So when reviewing a 1250 GS, the new iteration, the latest iteration of that mythical bike, it's very hard to put my feelings aside and not push them through and not let them sip through when I'm talking about this. But they're pointless. What I think in terms of history is pointless. And in that idea, in that sense, I do not want to talk about this bike as the legacy it has. I do not want to talk about this bike as in can it perform off-road and can it perform on-road. We all know it does, and there's more than enough people showing exactly what these bikes can do off-road. So when I'm here and I would be talking about specs, that's also not good. Not for this video, not for what I want to convey to you. Because we can see this spec, this spec, this spec, and this spec, and that still is not going to tell us anything on the day-to-day. So what I want to do with this bike is slightly different. I want to grab it, I want to drive a little bit on-road, I want to drive a little bit off-road, everything soft, everything smooth. Exactly like the large majority of people are going to use this bike. And I want to tell you every single little thing that I'll find. Good, bad, and just some things that we will get used to it if we continue to drive this bike for a long time. So let's start. And what happens when you unleash this bike onto twisties? This is where it comes alive. This bike is a prestige bike, it's a premium bike, but it likes to be driven like a hooligan. It likes for you to dive into the corners like crazy. It likes for you to push the throttle really hard and for you to brake almost MotoGP like right on top of the corner for you to get in and hit the apex one time, another time. It works, it just works. Everything works brilliantly when you're pushing it. The more you push it, the better it handles. And wow, that's something. You do not need more horsepower for this. You do not need a bigger engine for this. I'm pretty sure BMW is going to bring us one of the two or possibly both next year just to be able to continue matching up and going pound by pound with the other big adventure bikes. But honestly, I don't think it needs any of that. It just performs. Look at this little thing go. But I don't think this is twisty enough, so let's go into the mountain. Let's see how it performs right in the middle of the mountain where the twisties are a little bit more tight and where we need to, well, drive differently. So on the road, I've been driving this bike for the past 2 days and it just keeps on performing. The shift cam is flawless, it's smooth, I cannot feel it. Some people say they can, I could not mimic the things that they said. So for me, it's a win. They did beautifully. You have always power available, regardless of the gear, regardless of the RPM range. Although I do have the feeling that from the 4,000 RPM up, the bike just becomes super alive and it becomes slightly a different bike. Not perfectly different like you are used to once the bikes hit certain range of RPMs, but it just gets a little zhuzh more and it works really, really well. As far as the maps, you can change them on the go. They do work as advertised. For me, I would just choose one setup and the suspension, and that's what I would do on a normal day-to-day. But if you do like to change and if you want to change between them, you can, it's gonna work. I wouldn't like to use this bike on a day-to-day in the city though. It's a big boxer engine that does irradiate quite a little bit of heat when you're either at idle or just moving really, really slowly. The clutch becomes really hard when you have to feather quite a little bit, and the shift is a bit clunky. So I wouldn't like to do all of that in the city on a constant day-to-day basis. I'm 170, so in terms of ergonomics, the bike does perform really well. I can reach with my foot down on the floor, not with both, enough to do maneuvers, but I can reach with one really well. I believe that if you're up to 165, you're also not gonna have a lot of problems. Below that, I would say definitely take it for a test drive. And not because you will not be able to reach the floor, but because it is a 500 plus pound bike. It's heavy, so when you have to move around, you're not gonna have a lot of wiggle room. If you're a taller person, you're not gonna have an issue at all. You're gonna fit really well. Although above the 2-meter mark, I would say definitely see if your knees or if your legs are not gonna touch the cylinder heads. For me, the sitting position with the seat at the lower position, I do feel my arms slightly bit higher than I would like, and when I'm standing up I do feel them a slightly little bit lower than I would like. So for me, if this was my long-term bike, I would need to find an adjustment, but I would have no issue at all driving it in stock as it is right now. So as far as the road is concerned, it's a win. It's a great bike. It doesn't need more horsepower, it doesn't need a bigger engine, it doesn't need a different suspension. As far as I'm concerned, on the road, if you're gonna eat miles, if you're gonna drive on the open road, on the twisties or on the highway, but you do not want a big GT bike, you do not want a cruiser, this is actually a very, very good choice. Pricey, but a very good choice. And what about off-road? How does it stand off-road? So off-road in this kind of terrain where it's free, the bike just performs beautifully. It's a highway, any bike can go through this, any car can go through this, and this one does it like no man's business. Now when the terrain gets a bit more technical, as it does here, things are slightly different. Because although the weight of the bike is really down low, which allows for a very nice handling, the clutch does get a bit heavy when you start having to feather it, because this is a bit more technical than I would like to have a bike this size and power on, because it doesn't allow me to actually release all of that power. So I don't have enough space, so I have to fiddle the clutch quite a lot. Plus, it's cast wheels, not spoke wheels, it's not 21 in the front, it's 19, and even the position of the brake pedal, it's quite low if you want to actually brake with the rear in any good fashion or manner. So off-road, it does have its limitations, but it would be expected from a bike with this size and with this amount of power. So the real question is, would I take it off-road? With the right set of tires, I actually would, but I would also set the level of difficulty of that off-road as easy and very much within my comfort zone. I like to do off-road to have fun, and I find it hard to do so while battling such a big and powerful bike and knowing the price tag of all the little parts that will break once I actually let it fall. Overall, this is a great road bike that with ease will allow you to continue once the tarmac ends, but so will many others at the market at a very different price range. Still, set aside your prejudice and book a test drive. It's pricey, it's big, it's heavy, but it retains that feeling, that amazing feeling of a boxer engine, and that feeling is something quite unique that we should all try at least once in life.